So, Danny, yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
story broke via the Examiner initially in town. Maybe some others had it after that. I'm not sure. But the gist being that the D.C. City Council has suggested the possibility of taking the stadium out of the proposed budget that needs to be voted on next month. That would mean kicking the can down the road. Now, that's very different than saying no to the stadium or not ever voting on the stadium. Everybody is still saying they're going to do the deal eventually. Not this deal, a deal, but eventually it's good for the city. We're going to come around. We're going to do this. That's what they're saying. We had a council member, Zachary Parker, in that chair late last week say this. We've had many others on the air say this. But Phil Mendelson, I'll just read from the Examiner, who's the counsel of the District of Columbia, proposed separating the bill, approving the new Commander Stadium from Mayor Muriel Bowser's budget legislation, which is expected to face a vote on July 15th. On Friday, Mendelson introduced a standalone bill called the RFK Center Campus Redevelopment Act of 2025 to give Washington, D.C. lawmakers time to review the legislation. So they want more time, and they need to move forward with the budget. They feel like they're being pressured into saying yes to have this involved with the budget. Here's the problem I have with that. Literally 2 weeks before that, Mendelson tweeted, despite reporting to the contrary, there are no plans to take the RFK funding out of the budget. In fact, I have said explicitly that the funding will be cabined, in other words, protected. Now, when he says, and said in interviews simultaneously on TOP and some other places, that they are not going to take the stadium out of the budget, I took that to mean that it will be part of what gets voted on in July ultimately, because it's going to be part of this budget. Mark Seagraves of NBC4, in a story I could read to you, suggested, he was the one that broke the news, they're going to take this out of the budget, I'm hearing. And they made a big deal and said, no, we're not. That report is wrong. And now they're taking it out of the budget 2 weeks later. So my question to you, and we talked about this before the show a lot, and never really
dizzying.
Came to a resolution. But I guess if anybody out there who is a smart person would like to weigh in on this and answer this for me, I'm all ears. Starring JP Finley on NBC4. 800-636-1067. My question to you is, did they lie, or is this a matter of semantics? I believe they said they were not going to do the thing that it sounds like they're trying to do. They're not going to take the stadium out of the budget that they're voting on in July. That is what I heard when they said, call me crazy. Contrary to popular reporting, there are no plans to take the RFK funding out of the budget. And then 2 weeks later, they're taking the RFK funding out of the budget. But your point is, well, they're just saying that they're still setting aside $1.1 billion for funding, but it's not going to be in the budget, and they didn't actually lie. It's the semantics of, I'm viewing the money that they're setting to the side as, not in the budget, and they are, basically.
Yeah, so again, I find this dizzying, exhausting. I'm not mad at you.
Yeah, for
just
me,
in general.
It's pretty simple. I think they said something 2 weeks ago, and they're doing the opposite now, and it annoys me.
He said, so talking about is Mendelson, we're not taking the funding out, and they're not, as I understand it. Like, the money is in, now until they do that, then I guess I would say I don't know that they've lied. I don't know why you'd go into these semantics games instead of just being upfront, because your initial complaint, by the way, I think is a decent one, going, we didn't see any of this until now. The only numbers we have are provided by advocates for this thing. We don't really consider those great numbers. We want to do some studying on it. I think that's a very reasonable position to have for anybody, right? Any lawmaker. You're doing your due diligence. If that's your answer to something, people might get mad, but that's a pretty good answer. That's a pretty good comeback to anything that people have. So I don't know why you would have made any kind of declarative statement, and now we've got to do a semantic sort of like endless tailspin to figure out what take out of the budget means, or take funding out versus removing versus carving out. It's not why we're here. It's not very fun, to be honest with you. It's not a great discussion in terms of us both going, well, I'm not really sure what they mean. I think it means this, but it could mean that. I mean, to me, he said, going back to the initial quote, talking about Mendelson, we're not taking the funding out of the budget. He reiterates that the funding is still there. So in his mind, he'll probably go, yeah, we didn't. I'm not lying. I'm not doing anything different than I said. But the reality is, you're separating
the
things.
Nobody has suggested that the funding is going away. In other words, nobody thought that when they said that they might do this, or the report that Seagraves on MEC4 had was not, they're never going to vote for the stadium. They're not going to keep $1 billion laying around for the stadium, that they're saying no to the stadium. Nobody thought that. The point is, they're voting on the 2026 budget on July 15th. Are you going to be voting on the stadium then or not? Because if not, there's no rush. They casually said fall. I don't know what that means.
Mhm.
Parker was sitting in that chair right there. He was very impressive. I really liked him, actually. He told us Friday, whatever day that was, in studio, that they're going to vote in the fall. Is that September 5th? Is that November 9th? I mean, that means nothing. By the way, the team is saying, and they put out a statement yesterday on this, we don't have the luxury to wait until the fall. We need to confirm with whether or not we're able to go chase down the Women's World Cup so we can start to make some of the money back that you guys are so worried about us making back. We've got the ability to sign up for things and to get on lists that we miss out on if we don't open in 2030, which is their beginning and end of their story. They want to be open in 2030. And every month that you push this back, when they feel like they've got to break ground in 2026, I know that's true. When they're number one, every meeting they have, everything that they do starts with, we have told our fans and fully expect, we've told our players and everybody, we will be in a new stadium in 2030. We're working back from that. If you can't deliver on that, then we got to talk to somebody else. I mean, that's where they are essentially on this. And they think that DC can and should deliver. We got a poll of the day right now, by the way, on Twitter. It's the 1067 The Fan account, our Grant and Danny Metropolitan Moving and Storage poll of the day. This is a good one, actually. It's presented by Metropolitan Moving and Storage, local, long distance, residential, commercial, 3 decades, best-in-class service and experience. What is your assessment of how the D.C. City Council has handled the RFK Stadium situation so far? A, doing their due diligence, doing their jobs. B, botching a great opportunity. Or C, it's too early to tell. Early on, 60% are saying they're botching a really good opportunity. Let's go to the Rude Guest hotline right now and welcome in our buddy Eric Flack of Channel 9, an award-winning reporter in town, has been all over this story. Rude, the most reliable heating and air conditioning products in the DMV, sponsor of our hotline. So, Eric, when I say they lied or that 2 weeks ago they told us something different than what they're doing, is that fair to say it that way?
I mean, so it depends on where you're standing. I mean, I think they're backtracking. I think Mendelsohn could argue, look, let me not mince words as much as politicians would mince words. I think lie is strong because I think situations can change. They are doing the opposite of what they said they were going to do. Now, you may call that a lie, but in my opinion,
that's a bad prediction.
I'm going to say that to my wife tonight. Why did you lie about that? I didn't lie.
I just said the opposite of what I was going to do.
I just did the opposite of what I told you I was going to do.
You see?
Oh my God, it sounds as ridiculous as it did when it came out of my mouth. But they are doing the opposite of what they said they were going to do, and whether that's because they would argue that the budget process has been more difficult than they expected, or whether Mendelsohn would acknowledge that he has kind of been convinced by the council members who wanted to do this back when he issued that statement and when they were having that closed door meeting talking about this, he's finally come around. But, to me, lying means here's where I would draw the distinction. And it might be a distinction without a difference, but lying means at the time Mendelsohn knew 2 weeks later, whereas we're standing here right now, that he was going to, in fact, introduce this piece of legislation to pull it to separate.
It's a great point, but let me just say, Eric, that the reason he was asked about it at the time was that there was a report, wouldn't be a colleague, but by one of your fellow reporters in Mark Seagraves, suggesting that they were already doing it. So it's not like it was out of thin air, that he reported this is what they want to do. They came out and blasted it and said, no, we don't. And 2 weeks later, now they're suggesting that's what they might do. So at worst, it kind of looks suspicious, I would say. But let me ask you this about the fall vote. It is very clear to me when I talk to people with the team that 2030 is the beginning of the story. That is a flag in the ground. We've got to be opening our stadium in 2030 situation. And they believe the fall, for a lot of reasons, makes it very hard to do that. So when Parker sat in here and said we can vote in the fall, and I don't necessarily know how you can say that when you won't accept this deal, you're going to accept a deal that isn't available and on the table yet, but you think you can come to some agreement on a new deal, even though the team hasn't agreed to it. So whatever. But is there a date like July 15th is when they vote, and then they have another vote again October 15th? Or is that just a vague thing, like fall time we'll get around to a deal?
Well, I mean, no, I think that's a vague thing. And I was told that the issue would be dragging out into September, which is also not cool with the Commanders. The Commanders are saying that they need it done at the latest in August to meet all these deadlines. Now, I was told by one council member that, I think he's telling me that there's a possibility it drags out into September. But the idea that it drags all the way out into October seems a little bit unnecessary. And a lot of this seems unnecessary to a lot of people. But certainly one would think that once they get past the budget, they can focus on the stadium deal. And I think there's questions among council members just how serious this timeline is. The Commander, and I'm not saying right or wrong, I'm just saying they are sorting this out in their own minds, how legitimate this idea that if they take a couple extra months to go through this deal, that it's going to cost, opening dates and bids on Women's World Cup. And I know that it doesn't mean they think the Commanders are bluffing. I think council members just have not been convinced and just don't know for sure.
So let me ask you this then. Eric Flack, award-winning reporter from Channel 9, is with us on Grant and Danny. I actually think that's a great point, and calling their bluff probably is good practice from them because they want to be in D.C., as you know, and I know, way more than they want to be in Maryland, right? So
Right.
Totally get all that. I guess my question is, from the team's perspective, okay, they may even tell you privately, if it was done, they don't want this, but if it was done in September, no problem. But just the idea of, we think we'll have a deal in the fall. But you saw, where was the thing you sent us from today? Was that the Post where all of the council members said what they need? And somebody wants, former criminals like working on the project. And there's all these different little things that everybody wants. It's a different deal. So how can you guarantee you'll have a deal in the fall? It's like me saying, like, we're going to get married in the fall, but we're not engaged yet. And someone else has to say yes. Does that make any sense?
1,000%. And what I'm saying is that this is, somebody just asked me, like, how big is the threat level? And I think we're still at a 5 or a 6, but my corollary to that is that the threat level is growing every day. As the Commanders get, their back up about this, and obviously frustration on the Commanders' part about all this, understandably, and as council members kind of get more and more involved. And it's kind of like you two friends who started out like with a plan to do something really cool, and then they start like bickering about stuff, and then all of a sudden they're actually fighting about it, and they're like, how did we get here? And that's kind of like where it seems like we're going. Is like everybody kind of seemed like they were on the same page, and then one side is like, we need to take some time, and the other side is like, but we don't have any time. And then people are like, well, you know what? This deal isn't good enough, darn it. And then the other side is like, well, but I mean, the deal is really, really good, and it's going to be good for the city. And now all of a sudden we're asking, check out Councilmember Robert White's TikTok right now. Have Darius do that for you. You guys will see an interesting video he just posted about some of the things that he wants out of the deal.
Can you give us some cliff notes?
What if you didn't want to go on a TikTok? What would happen?
Just, you got to watch it for yourself.
Damn it, Eric!
I have not been on TikTok.
I can't go. I can't go any farther than that. I can't go any farther than that. I will. That's a tease for you.
Does anyone working? We have young people.
People are here. They'll take care of it.
TikTok account? Gareth is on TikTok.
I'm actually not on TikTok. I'm not a TikTok guy.
Ryan or Toby?
Is Ryan Clary in today?
He is. You got TikTok?
But he's corporate though.
Clary says he's got TikTok. We're good.
We'll fix
Tell
it.
him to go on Robert White's TikTok. He just posted a creative video about what he wants done with the new stadium.
Creative TikTok video. Who does he think he is? Running for mayor of New York or something?
Here we go.
Are you watching it?
Not yet. No.
No.
We got to go in the other room. It's going to be a whole thing.
Anyway, but my point is that a lot of people are going to start coming with a lot of different asks, and things are going to get complicated. So, but are the Commanders really going to back out now? I mean, are they not in for a penny, in for a pound as much as DC is? Like, where do they go from here? How much negotiating power do they have? I'm asking you guys. You know, I mean, that's where I kind of like, they can stomp their fist and stomp their feet all they want and say, like, if you don't hurry up, we're gonna what?
They're going to build
What
in
are they
Maryland.
Turn this car around.
Come on.
I'm telling you, I don't think it's as
Gosh.
crazy as people think.
So I do think it's as crazy as people think. I'm people in that situation.
No,
but
I'm not saying as unpopular as people think. I'm saying it's crazy. Everyone will hate it until you open a ridiculously awesome stadium where you can actually tailgate and actually, something that's a major issue. You won't be at FedEx Field anymore, which is the number one priority.
I will say this. I mean, I don't know if you guys are running out of time. I will say this. Josh Harris spent years trying to build a downtown basketball arena that I went out and reported on, and it was going to revitalize downtown Philly. And it was like the same sort of principles as the stadium. And it became such a mess that they ended up getting like right at the point where it started going through a council, and he got the support of the mayor, and they got like almost to the finish line, that he just changed at the last second. And now they're building their new arena out at Wells Fargo, next to the old one. But there's all these aspects of Philadelphians that don't like change. So they didn't want their arena downtown. They just wanted it where the rest of the ballparks are. And so that's what he's doing. But I mean, there is a history of Harris like changing at the last second and doing something like that. So even though I don't believe it's reasonable, like there is past precedent for them putting a lot of effort into something, including the same sort of public relations campaigns as they're doing with this stadium, and then saying, you know what, forget about it. We're just going to go do this other thing.
Eric, you're the best. Thanks, you, buddy. You got to run. Be good. There's our guy, Eric Flack. Check him out on Channel 9. There's also some history of the DC City Council sitting on their hands for a while. And then when a team almost goes somewhere else saying, actually, never mind, we found some money, you can stay.